Welcome to the 2011 Fall Edition of ALMComplete, QAComplete, and DevComplete. This movie will show you the new features that we've introduced in this new release. With this release, you'll see a new tab called Releases. This is where you can begin to organize your releases. You can do that by product line. In this example, we've created a product line called Orders Application, and we've defined some releases. Notice that you can define releases, sprints or iterations, as well as builds or patches. Once you've defined these and you start linking artifacts to that, you can see how many items you have linked. I can see in this particular sprint that we have a number of different requirements, project plan tasks, as well as defects. You can also see percentage complete as well as variance information. If you want to drill down lower into that information, you can click on a drill down report. This report will give you a bird's eye view of the release. It'll show you all of the impact information for the release, as well as what requirements were gathered in the release, how many test runs have been run against them, all of the test information, as well as all of the work hour detail. For both ALMComplete and DevComplete, you'll notice that we've enhanced our project management features. You can now create project plans and link those to specific releases. If you're using Agile development, you can also come into this new Agile Tasks area and have freeform areas where you can add tasks, link those up to requirements, and link those back to a specific release. You might have also noticed that you have a Releases area over here in the tab. From here, you can begin to navigate your release and see all of the items that are in that particular release. Both ALMComplete and QAComplete have a new area called Test Management. In the Test Management area, you'll notice that we've divided our test library and our test sets. In the library, you can define particular test cases for a particular application. You can also subdivide that down by functional area. And in addition to that, you'll also notice that our test cases now have configurable steps. With the steps area, you can define the step as well as the expected result right next to it. You can also drag and drop steps from existing test cases to make creating test cases very easy. Once you have your tests defined in the library, you can come to this area called Configurations. This is where you can define different configurations. For example, maybe you have different operating systems and browsers, and you want to define those so that you can run your tests for those particular browsers as well as operating systems. You can define that here. Once you've defined your configurations, you can then create test sets. Test sets are simply a grouping of tests that you want to run for a particular reason. In this particular example, we've created a regression test area under the Orders application that contains test suites for regression. And within this test suites area, you'll notice that we have a number of different test sets that we've created. For each one of these test sets, you can define what tests appear in that test set. You can even choose what order they're run in, and you can choose specific tests, and you can even flag particular tests as being critical tests, where if that particular test doesn't pass, the rest of the tests can't proceed. You'll notice that you can also track run history. This will show you every time this test set has run. You'll notice the same thing over in the test library. You can come to the test library and see every time a particular test has run. When you're working with test sets, you can run those test sets and you can link those up to specific configurations. Notice this batch processing test is linked to a particular release, but I can also link that to specific configurations. For example, let's imagine that I want to run this in Windows XP IE8 and IE9. I can easily choose that and it'll set that to be run. When I begin the run process, you'll notice we have a new testing engine. This testing engine allows you to tie one of these runs to a particular release. You can also choose what configuration to run it in. Once here, you'll see all of the tests that you're allowed to run. It also shows here the average run time for each one of these tests based on the past run history. To begin the run, just press Run, and then it'll show you each of the steps in this particular test case, and you can log your actual results here. You can pass all the steps and continue on through the process. If you get to a particular test that fails, for example, let's say that this one fails down here, you can describe here what actually happened. At this point, you can press Submit. It'll ask you if you'd like to generate a defect based on that failed test. This pops up a defect, allows you to fill in any additional information. Notice that the steps to reproduce are automatically filled in. Once you've done this, you can then assign it to someone, press Submit, and it'll route that on out to the person that's assigned. At this point, it shows us all of our tests that have either passed or failed. When we come back over to the listing screen, we'll see that this particular one has failed, and we can drill into that at any time and see that run history. Another improvement to both ALMComplete, QAComplete, and DevComplete is the new Team Task Board. From the Team Task Board, you can choose all of the items for a particular release, and you can see all of your project plan tasks, your agile tasks, your requirements, or defects from a single place. If you want to look at it for all of your team members, you can easily do that. If you want to drill into a specific user, you can do that as well. Finally, you'll notice some great improvements to both the dashboards and the reports. If you go into the releases area, you'll notice that there's a dashboard, and this will report across all artifacts within the release. For example, you can look at velocity, you can look at status, and you can look at resource allocation by assignee for the entire release. Similar to that, if you go into the test management area, you'll see a number of new dashboards. They'll be divided by two groups: the test library, which shows all of your tests by tester, but you can also see test sets that will identify any run activity. So this particular one here shows all of your runs by configuration, your runs by requirement, runs by assignee, and runs by test set. In addition to that, all of our reports have been restyled and new graphs have been added to those. You'll see an entire section of new reports called Test Management Reports. You can look at things like requirements missing tests, requirements traceability matrix. You can also see test run history, both detail and summary, by requirement, configuration, and test set. Let's take a look at a test runs by requirement. Once this is run, you'll see graphs that allow you to see all of your runs by requirement. You can also see them in a bird's eye view here so that you can see how many tests have passed and failed for your entire project. You can also navigate this tree on the left-hand side. So if you're looking at a particular project and maybe a particular application, you can go into that release and look at all of the requirements related to that release. If you want to see some of the detail, simply continue to page and it'll show you the detail that makes that up. You'll notice that most of our reports have been restyled to provide better statistics from a graphical perspective as well as detail perspective. This was an overview of the 2011 Fall Edition. We hope you enjoy the new features.